The tray landed on Talia Brooks's table with the softest little clink, which was funny in a way because nothing about it felt soft after that. Half a turkey wrap, a plastic cup of water, and one of those paper napkins so thin you could read bad news through it. Across the aisle, a man in a gray suit was cutting into herb-roasted filet, while a flight attendant topped off his champagne for the second time. Talia looked down at her tray, then looked up at the woman standing over her, and for one long second, the whole first-class cabin got very quiet in her head. "I'm sorry, Ms. Brooks," the attendant said, though she did not sound sorry at all. "Your requested meal was not loaded. This is all we have left." Talia did not raise her voice. She did not make a scene. She just looked at the woman, then at the rows of polished silverware and hot meals around her, and said, "That is interesting, because I ordered mine 9 days ago." The woman gave a small shrug, the kind people use when they've already decided your problem is not worth their time. The system misses things sometimes. Then she walked away, and that should have been the end of it, right? A bad meal, a tired flight attendant, a little inconvenience at 30,000 feet. But it was not the end. It was the first loose thread in a sweater that had been hiding an ugly pattern for years. Talia Brooks had boarded Dominion Air Flight 48-2 just after sunset, heading from New York to Vienna for what was supposed to be a very simple reason. By the following afternoon, she would be sitting in a conference room with a group of European investors, signing the final paperwork on a partnership that had taken her company nearly 3 years to build. Her company, Axiom Ridge, had started in a windowless office above a tailor shop in Newark, with 2 laptops, 1 coffee maker, and an idea nobody wanted to fund until the numbers got too good to ignore. They built security systems for hospitals, banks, and public infrastructure, the kind of technology people only notice when it fails, which was exactly how Talia liked it. Quiet, useful, dependable. By 42, she'd become the kind of CEO people wrote articles about, though she still had a habit of packing her own carry-on and checking the weather 3 times before every trip. She was wearing a dark green suit, low leather heels, and the same watch her father gave her when she closed her first major deal. It was not flashy. Talia had never liked flashy. Flashy made people stare at the wrong things. She preferred being underestimated for about 5 minutes, just long enough for someone to make a mistake. When she stepped into the first-class cabin, she noticed the usual things first. The buttery leather seats, the low amber lights, the smell of warm bread and expensive perfume, the tiny orchid tucked beside the drink menu like it had a frequent flyer number. She also noticed something else. The young male attendant at the door smiled past her before he smiled at her. "Welcome aboard," he said, but his eyes had already moved to the white man behind her, a tall fellow with a navy overcoat and a face that looked permanently impressed with itself. "Mr. Larkin, good to see you again. We have your preferred champagne ready." Talia stood there for half a second, not offended exactly, just observant. She had spent enough years in rooms where people assumed she was the assistant, the public relations person, the diversity hire, the person who must have come with someone more important. It rarely came in one big, ugly moment. It came in little pieces. Someone asking if she could print the presentation. Someone handing her a coat. Someone calling her sweetheart right before learning she owned half the company they were trying to impress. So she smiled, gave the attendant a polite nod, and made her way to seat 2D. She had selected that seat herself because she liked the window, and because she had learned years ago that choosing your own seat was a small way of reminding the world that you were allowed to take up space. Her assistant, Maren Cole, had booked everything down to the last detail. The flight, the hotel, the driver, the quiet room on the top floor because Talia slept badly before negotiations. The meal, too. Wild mushroom soup, black cod with lemon rice, and a glass of Pinot Noir from Oregon. It was not about luxury. Talia could eat airport pretzels and survive just fine. She ordered the same meal whenever she flew Dominion because, years earlier, on a flight home after her mother had been in the hospital, that warm bowl of mushroom soup was the first thing she had eaten in 2 days. Since then, it became a little ritual, a reminder that even when life got messy, some small things could still be counted on. That was why the cold turkey wrap hit differently. It was not the sandwich. It was the message behind it. The flight attendant's name was Claire Hensley. Talia had noticed the name tag when Claire first introduced herself. She was maybe in her late 30s, blonde hair twisted into a neat knot, lipstick perfect, posture perfect, smile almost perfect. Claire had the kind of manner that made you wonder if she had been trained at a 5-star hotel or a country club where nobody ever used your first name unless they outranked you. "Good evening, Miss Brooks," Claire had said earlier, looking down at the tablet in her hand. "I see you were traveling alone." There was a strange little pause after that, almost too small to mention. Talia had looked up. "I am." Claire smiled. "Well, I hope we can make your evening comfortable." She said it like Talia had been admitted somewhere by mistake, and everyone was trying hard not to bring it up. The other passengers did not seem to notice. Or maybe they noticed and did what people often do when something uncomfortable happens in front of them. They looked at their phones. They laughed at something too loudly. They found a reason to care deeply about the wine list. The men in 1A and 1B were already talking about private equity and ski homes. One of them, a silver-haired man named Grant Larkin, kept referring to Vienna as the little stop before the real meetings begin. Another man, younger with a red tie and a wedding ring he kept twisting, asked Claire if there was any chance he could get another serving of the black cod. Claire laughed warmly. "For you, Mr. Larkin, I will see what I can do." Talia heard that and almost laughed herself because there was something so absurd about it. The man had just been offered a second helping of a meal she had apparently never been allowed to have in the first place. She watched Claire move down the aisle, leaning close to the men, remembering their names, asking about their travel plans, offering warm towels and dessert options. When Claire passed Talia, her smile disappeared just enough to be noticeable. "Would you like anything else with your sandwich?" she asked. Talia looked at the tray. "Do you have the meal I ordered?" Claire's eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second. "As I said, Miss L. Brooks, it was not loaded, but the other meals were?" Claire gave a careful breath, like Talia was making her day unnecessarily difficult. "There are operational limits on every flight." "I understand operational limits," Talia said. "I run a technology company. What I do not understand is why every other person in this cabin has a hot meal, and I have a turkey wrap." Claire pressed her lips together. "I am doing the best I can." Now that one almost made Talia smile, because people loved saying that when they had not done much at all. "No," Talia said quietly. "You were doing what you decided was enough." Claire blinked. There it was, the first crack. Not fear, not guilt, just irritation. She leaned down slightly, keeping her voice low. "I do not appreciate being accused of something over a meal service." Talia held her gaze. "Then do not make this about a meal service." Claire straightened up, gave that same tight smile, and walked away. Talia sat back in her seat. Outside the window, the sky was dark blue and endless, the kind of dark that made you feel like the whole world below had disappeared. She thought about calling Marin right then. She thought about hitting the call button and asking to speak to the purser. She thought about doing what she had been told to do her entire life when someone treated her badly. Stay calm. Be gracious. Do not make them uncomfortable. Do not give them a reason to say you are angry. Do not become the story. The problem with that advice was that it usually came from people who had never needed it. Talia had spent her 20s carrying that advice around like a heavy coat. She remembered one pitch meeting in Palo Alto when she was 31, back when Axiom Ridge was still barely more than a dream and a few brilliant people who believed in her. She had walked into a glass conference room with 6 investors waiting inside. Before she could introduce herself, one of them pointed at the coffee station and said, "Could you bring in 2 more cups?" Talia had looked at him, then at the coffee station, then back at him. "Sure," she said. "Right after I explain why your network will be vulnerable in less than 18 months. The room had gone quiet. Later, after she finished the presentation, that same man tried to shake her hand like nothing had happened. She did not punish him. She did not need to. She simply let the numbers do what they did best. They proved he had been wrong. That memory came back to her now. Not because she wanted revenge, but because she knew the feeling in her chest. It was not rage. It was exhaustion, the deep kind. The kind of noise that instantly makes you stop whatever you're doing, can climb every mountain people put in front of you. And someone will still look at you standing at the top and ask if you got lost on the way there. Talia looked down at the turkey wrap again. The lettuce had gone soft around the edges. There was a tiny packet of mustard sitting beside it, almost cheerful in its uselessness. "You have got to be kidding me," she whispered. The woman in the seat across from her heard it and glanced over. She was older, maybe late 60s, with silver hair and a small gold cross around her neck. She'd been quiet since boarding, reading a paperback novel and drinking tea. Her name, according to the seat map on the screen, was Eleanor Price. Eleanor looked at Talia's tray, then at the meals being served around them. "That is not what you ordered, is it?" she asked softly. Talia shook her head. No, ma'am. Eleanor looked toward Claire, who was laughing at something one of the men had said. I saw the whole thing, she said. They brought your meal up first. I saw it in the galley when I went to wash my hands. Talia turned to her. You did? Eleanor nodded. Black cod. A nice plate, too. I remember because I almost changed my own order. Talia felt something in her stomach tighten. Did you see what happened to it? Eleanor gave a small, uneasy shake of her head. No, but I saw Claire carrying it away after she looked at your name. That was it. Not proof, not yet, but it was enough to make the room feel different. Enough to make the little details line up. The cold tone, the missing meal. The way Claire had called everyone else by name. The way she had watched Talia with that strange measuring expression. Talia reached into her handbag and pulled out her phone. She did not open social media. She did not start recording a speech for strangers. She opened the email with her booking confirmation. There it was, plain as day. Dominion Air Flight 4A2, Seat 2D. Pre-selected dining request. Confirms 9 days earlier. She took a screenshot, then another. She photographed the cold-wrapped plastic cup, the paper napkin. She turned the camera slightly and captured the man across the aisle eating black cod under the warm cabin lights. Then she set her phone down and stared at it for a moment. The plane hummed around her. Somewhere behind the curtain, dishes clinked. The captain announced they had reached cruising altitude. Everybody else settled into their movie choices and their drinks and their little bubbles of comfort. Talia opened a new message thread with Marin. She typed, "Need you to look into something. Dominion Flight 48-2, first class meal issue. I need confirmation of my pre-order, the service policy, and names of senior customer ethics contacts." She paused, then added, "Please treat this as urgent." Marin replied in less than a minute. Understood. Do you want legal looped in? Talia looked down the aisle. Claire was standing beside Mr. Bide, Larkin's seat, offering him a second dessert. He was laughing at something she said. Talia watched the scene for a moment, then typed back, "Not yet. Start with facts." That was how Talia worked. Facts first, feelings later. And Claire Hensley, standing there with her polished hair and her perfect little smile, had no idea that the woman she had decided did not deserve a hot meal had just started building a file. Not a complaint, not a tantrum, a file. And before that plane reached Vienna, it was going to become something Dominion Air could not ignore. Marin did not ask a lot of questions because she had worked with Talia long enough to know that the quieter Talia sounded, the more serious things usually were. 5 minutes after the message, while the cabin lights dimmed and the movie screens flickered on around the first-class section, Talia's phone vibrated once beneath the edge of her blanket. Marin had written, "Your meal was confirmed at check-in and loaded onto the aircraft catering manifest. I am pulling the service log now." Talia read the message twice, then looked through the narrow opening in the curtain toward the galley. Claire was there with another flight attendant, a young man named Owen, and they were speaking in low voices. Owen looked uncomfortable. Claire did not. Claire looked irritated, like someone had just told her a customer wanted to return a sweater without a receipt. Talia could not hear what they were saying, but she could see Claire point toward the front cabin, then shake her head. Owen glanced in Talia's direction, noticed her looking, and immediately looked away. That little move told her more than a speech ever could. People do not look away that fast unless they know something they should not know. Eleanor Price leaned across the aisle just enough to be heard. "You have someone checking on it?" she asked. Talia nodded. "A friend at my office." Eleanor smiled faintly. "Good. I am retired, honey, which means I have too much time and not enough patience for nonsense. Tell me what you need." Talia almost laughed. It was the first time she had smiled since the tray arrived. "For now, just remember what you saw." Eleanor tapped her paperback against her knee. "Oh, I remember things very well when somebody annoys me. That was when Owen came over?" He stopped beside Talia's seat with his hands folded in front of him, shoulders stiff, eyes fixed somewhere near the floor. "Miss Brooks," he said quietly, "I wanted to let you know I am checking with catering about your requested meal." Talia looked up at him. "You are checking with catering now?" Owen swallowed. "Yes, ma'am. The flight has been in the air for almost 2 hours. I understand." Talia held his gaze. He looked young, maybe 27, maybe 28, with tired eyes and a wedding band that looked a little too new. There was something familiar in his face. Not guilt exactly. Fear. The kind of fear people get when they are standing close to something wrong but have not yet decided whether they are willing to be part of it. "Owen," Talia said, reading his name tag. "I am going to ask you one question, and I want you to answer it honestly. Was my meal loaded onto this aircraft?" The question landed between them. He looked toward the galley. Claire was no longer visible, but her presence somehow still filled the space. Owen cleared his throat. I cannot confirm that without checking the records. That is not what I asked. His face went pale. For a few seconds, the engines were the only sound between them. Then he said, almost under his breath, I saw the plate. Talia did not move. What plate? The black cod meal. Your name was on the meal tag. I saw it before service. Talia felt something inside her settle, not because she was surprised, but because now the story had shape. Before that moment, it had been a feeling, a pattern. A cold little sting in a luxury cabin. But a name tag was not a feeling. A name tag was a fact. What happened to it, she asked. Owen's eyes flicked toward the galley again. I do not know. Talia leaned back. You do. He pressed his lips together. Claire said there had been a last-minute request from a priority guest. Who? He did not answer. Owen, Talia said, and her voice was calm enough to make him look at her. I am not asking you to protect me. I am asking you why you are protecting someone who put my name on a plate, took that plate away, and handed me a cold wrap while serving everyone else around me. His jaw tightened. For a second, Talia thought he might walk away. Then he said, Mr. Moore. Larkin asked if there was another black cod available. Claire said she would take care of it. Talia turned her head slowly toward Grant Larkin. He was asleep now, or pretending to be, tilted back in his seat with a cashmere blanket over his legs and an empty champagne flute resting on the tray beside him. He had ordered a second serving. Claire had found one. It just happened to have Talia's name on it. It would have been almost funny if it were not so familiar. Somebody important decides they want more, and suddenly somebody else becomes invisible. That was how it always worked. Not with a siren, not with a sign on the wall. Just a quiet decision made by someone who believed certain people could be moved aside without consequence. Thank you, Talia said. Owen looked relieved and terrified at the same time. Please do not tell her I said anything. Talia looked at him for a long moment. I will not make promises I cannot keep, but I will tell the truth about what happened. Owen nodded once and hurried back toward the galley. Eleanor watched him leave. Well, she said, that seems rather important. Talia let out a slow breath. It is. Her phone buzzed again. Marin had sent a longer message this time. Confirmed. Black cod was loaded and assigned to 2D. The service log shows it as reassigned at 9:18 p.m. by Senior Cabin Lead Claire Hensley. New assignment was 1A Grant Larkin. No replacement meal was entered for you. Also found 2 prior complaints naming Hensley for selective treatment and dismissive conduct. One was closed as a training issue. One was closed without action. Talia stared at the screen. The funny thing about proof is that it does not always make you feel better. Sometimes, it just removes the last excuse you were still trying to give someone. She had wanted it to be a mix-up. She had wanted a tired crew member, a bad system, a misplaced tray. Not because she did not understand what was happening, but because understand it was exhausting. There was a part of her that wanted to put the phone away, eat the stupid wrap, land in Vienna, and pretend none of it mattered. She had a deal to close. She had a company to run. She had spent too many years learning how not to let other people's smallness derail her day. But then she looked at Eleanor, at the empty space where her meal should have been, at Grant Larkin sleeping under a blanket after eating food that was not his, and she thought about every person who did not have her resources, her staff, her legal team, or her name in the business pages. Every young woman who had sat quietly because she knew speaking up would be used against her. Every person who had been treated like an inconvenience and told they were imagining it. Talia typed back, save everything. Get the crew service records and the escalation contact for Dominion Executive Ethics. Do not send anything yet. Marin replied almost immediately. Already doing it. There was no dramatic music on the plane. No sudden gasp from the passengers. No one knew that a quiet corporate war had just begun in C2D. Claire kept moving through the cabin, still smiling, still pouring wine, still acting like she had not taken something from Talia and handed it to a man who had not even asked what it cost. But now Talia watched her differently. She watched the pattern. Claire called Mr. Bursor Larkin by name every time she passed him. She called the younger man in the red tie Daniel, though he had never introduced himself. She asked a white woman 2 rows back whether she wanted a fresh blanket before the woman even looked cold. When a South Asian man in 3C pressed his call button, Claire walked past it twice before Owen finally came to help him. When the man asked for sparkling water, Claire said they were temporarily out, then poured sparkling water for Mr. Larkin less than 10 minutes later. Talia did not need to explain it to herself anymore. She was watching a system of tiny decisions, each one small enough to deny but together impossible to ignore. Around midnight, the cabin had gone quiet. Most passengers were asleep. The lights were dimmed to a soft blue, and outside the window, the Atlantic was nothing but darkness beneath the wing. Talia could not sleep. She had one of those minds that got louder when the world got quiet. She thought about her father, who drove a city bus for 30 years and wore the same brown jacket every winter until the elbows turned shiny. He used to tell her, "You do not have to prove you belong in every room, baby. You just have to decide which rooms are worth staying in." When she was younger, she thought that meant walking away from people who treated you badly. As she got older, she realized sometimes staying was the point. Sometimes you stayed long enough to make the room answer for itself. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was not Marin. It was a number she did not recognize. Talia hesitated, then opened the message. "Ms. Brooks, this is Marcus Vale, Director of Customer Ethics at Dominion Air. Marin Cole has informed us there may be an issue involving your service on Flight 482. I would appreciate the opportunity to speak with you immediately." Talia stared at the words. That was fast. Too fast for a normal customer complaint. She glanced toward the galley where Claire was sitting with her shoes off behind the curtain, scrolling through her phone. For the first time, Talia wondered whether Claire had any idea that the ground beneath her had started moving. Talia typed back, "I am willing to speak, but I am not interested in a courtesy call. I want the catering manifest, the service reassignment records, all relevant cabin footage preserved, and the names of every employee who had access to my meal assignment." She watched the typing bubble appear, disappear, then appear again. Finally, Marcus replied, "Understood. Those records are being preserved now." Talia set the phone down. Eleanor had woken up and was watching her over the top of her book. "Good news?" she asked. "Not yet," Talia said, "but maybe the truth is finally awake." Eleanor nodded slowly. "That is usually bad news for somebody." At 1:37 in the morning, Owen came back. He was carrying a small tray with a covered plate on it. He looked nervous enough to drop it. "Ms. Brooks," he whispered, "I found another meal." Talia looked at the covered plate. "Another black cod?" He nodded. "There was one held in reserve. And why was that not offered before?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. Claire was standing at the far end of the aisle watching them now. Her face had changed. The polished smile was gone. What was left was colder, more honest. Talia looked from Owen to Claire, then back to Owen. "Take it back," she said. Owen froze. "Ma'am, take it back, but it is your requested meal." Talia nodded. "It was my requested meal when I was supposed to be grateful for it. Now it is evidence that there was never a shortage." Owen stared at her. Then, very slowly, he lowered the tray. Claire began walking toward them. You could hear the soft tap of her shoes against the carpet, even over the engines. She stopped beside Talia's seat and looked at the covered plate. "Is there a problem?" Claire asked. Talia looked up at her. "No, Claire. The problem was earlier." Claire folded her arms. "We located an additional meal for you. I thought you would appreciate the effort." There was something almost insulting about the way she said it, like she was offering Talia a chance to be reasonable, now that the mess had become inconvenient. Talia leaned forward slightly. "You reassign my meal to Mr. Larkin." Claire's face did not change much, but Talia saw it. The smallest flicker, the quick calculation, the realization that someone had told her. "I do not know what you think you heard," Claire said. "I did not hear it. I had the service record." Claire looked toward Owen, and that look was sharp enough to make him flinch. "The meal was reassigned due to passenger priority." Talia repeated, "That is an interesting phrase. What does it mean?" "It means certain passengers have service considerations." "Such as?" Claire gave a small, humorless laugh. "Ms. Brooks, I do not think this needs to become adversarial." Talia smiled then, but it was not a warm smile. "Claire, you gave a meal with my name on it to a man who wanted seconds, then handed me a cold wrap and told me the system failed. You decided this was adversarial the minute you thought I would not push back." The cabin was quiet, but not asleep anymore. The woman in 2A had removed one earbud. The man in 3C looked up from his laptop. Even Grant Larkin stirred beneath his blanket, blinking like someone had interrupted a dream he thought he owned. Claire lowered her voice. "You are making assumptions." No, Talia said. I am reading the record. Claire's cheeks flushed. You do not understand how demanding certain passengers can be. There it was. Not a confession, not exactly, but close enough to show the shape of it. Talia tilted her head. And I was not demanding enough? Claire looked away. That was the moment Talia understood something deeper about her. Claire did not see herself as cruel. People like Claire almost never did. She saw herself as practical, efficient, good at reading a room. She had probably spent years learning which people earned her best tips, which names opened doors, which passengers were worth extra effort. Maybe someone had taught her that at an earlier job. Maybe she had learned it from a manager who winked and called it service instinct. Maybe nobody had ever stopped her because the people she dismissed did not have enough power to make it expensive. That did not excuse her, but it explained why she looked so confused now. She genuinely believed she had simply made a choice. Talia looked at her and said, "The trouble with treating people like they do not matter is that eventually you forget they are watching." Claire stood there for a second too long. Then she turned and walked away, without the careful grace she had carried all night. Her shoulders were tight, her steps were fast. Owen stayed behind, still holding the meal tray. "Should I take this back?" he asked. Talia nodded. "Yes." He hesitated. "I am sorry." Talia looked at him. "I believe you are. The question is what you do the next time somebody tells you to look away." Owen nodded once, and this time when he walked back to the galley, he did not look afraid. He looked ashamed. There is a difference. Shame can make people hide, but sometimes it can also make them change. A few minutes later, Marin sent another message. Found internal notes. Hensley has 2 documented complaints for preferential service behavior. One says she repeatedly referred to minority passengers as low-value flyers in a private crew chat. Another says she ignored a complaint because the passenger was not a corporate partner. I also found something bigger. Dominion has been quietly reviewing a pattern of service complaints on transatlantic premium routes. Talia read the message slowly. The story was getting larger than Claire. Larger than one meal, larger than one flight. There were systems inside systems, old habits protected by nice language, people calling bias an instinct and favoritism a business decision. Talia felt the anger rise again, but it was cleaner now. Not hot, not reckless. It had direction. She wrote back, "Send the full file to Marcus Vale. Copy Dominion General Counsel. Include only verified records. Ask them to have independent HR and legal representatives meet the crew in Vienna when we land." Marn replied, "Done." "You want a statement prepared?" Talia looked out the window. Somewhere below them, the ocean was black and endless. Somewhere ahead, Vienna was still hours away. "No," she typed. "Not yet. Let the facts arrive before the speeches do." A few minutes passed. Then her phone vibrated again. It was Marcus Vale. "Ms. Brooks, we have confirmed the reassignment. We've also preserved cabin records and initiated a formal review. A senior response team will meet you upon landing. We would appreciate your cooperation." Talia did not answer right away. She put the phone down and closed her eyes. For the first time that night, she felt tired in a way sleep would not fix. Eleanor reached across the aisle and touched the back of Talia's hand gently. "You all right?" Talia opened her eyes. "I think so." Eleanor gave her a knowing look. "No, honey. You are not all right, but you are going to be." Talia nodded. And somewhere near the front of the cabin, behind a drawn curtain, Claire Hensley was probably still telling herself this had all gotten out of hand over a plate of fish. She had no idea that in less than 4 hours, when the wheels touched down in Vienna, there would be people waiting who knew exactly what had happened, exactly what she had done, and exactly how long Dominion Air had allowed people like her to call it business as usual. By the time the first pale line of morning showed up beyond the wing, Talia had stopped looking at her phone every 30 seconds. There was nothing left for her to chase. The records were preserved, the catering log was locked, the messages had been sent, and somewhere on the ground in Vienna, a group of people in suits were probably drinking bad airport coffee while trying to figure out how a cold turkey wrap had turned into a corporate emergency. That was the strange thing about moments like this. From the outside, they looked small. A meal gets mixed up. A flight attendant says the wrong thing. Somebody feels insulted. But inside those moments, there were usually years of decisions piled on top of each other. Quiet little choices nobody wanted to examine because examining them would mean admitting what they'd been doing all along. Talia sat by the window as the cabin began to wake up. People stretched, checked their watches, fixed their collars, and acted like the night had been perfectly normal. Grant Larkin was awake now, looking rested and mildly annoyed at the world, like a man who had spent his whole life believing delays were personal attacks. He pressed his call button and waited. Claire appeared almost immediately, but she did not have the same smile anymore. She looked tired now, not physically tired. The kind of tired that comes when you realize the version of yourself you have been selling to everyone is starting to fall apart. "Coffee?" she asked him. Grant looked at her. "Please, and can you make sure my driver is waiting at the terminal?" Claire hesitated. For the first time all night, she did not answer right away. "I am not sure what arrangements have been made after landing, Mr. Larkin." He frowned. "What is that supposed to mean?" Claire looked past him just briefly, toward the front of the cabin where Talia sat. Grant followed her eyes, then turned back. Something clicked in his face, not all the way, but enough. He looked down at the empty plate on his tray table, the plate that had held Talia's dinner a few hours earlier, and the color drained from his cheeks. "Wait," he said. "Did I get someone else's meal?" Claire did not answer. Grant sat up straighter. "Claire, did I get someone else's meal?" She gave him the answer people give when they know the truth is bad, but they are still hoping language can hide it. There was a service adjustment. Grant stared at her. "A service adjustment? You had requested a second entree. I requested another entree because you told me there was one available." His voice was not loud, but it carried. A few people nearby looked over. Claire lowered her voice. "Mr. Larkin, this is not the right time." He leaned forward. "Whose meal was it?" Nobody said anything. Talia did not need to look at him. She could feel the question hanging there in the air, heavy and stupid and late. Finally, Claire said, "It was assigned elsewhere originally." Grant looked toward Talia again. This time, he did not look away. He looked embarrassed. Not the kind of embarrassment that made someone a hero, not yet, just the first uncomfortable realization that he had benefited from something ugly without even noticing. "Ms. Brooks," he said quietly. Talia turned from the window. Grant looked at her for a moment, then at the tray in front of her, still holding the untouched turkey wrap in its plastic container. "I did not know," he said. Talia believed him. That was the irritating part. She believed he had not known. He had not asked Claire to take food from her. He had not told anyone to serve him before her. He had simply made a request, and the system had bent itself around him because it was used to bending for men like him. "I know," Talia said. Grant's brow tightened. "Then why do I feel like I am part of this?" Talia looked at him for a second. "Because you are. Not because you meant to be, but because you never had to ask what it cost somebody else when the world gave you what you wanted." He looked down at his hands. That one landed. Talia could tell. Claire shifted beside him, uncomfortable with the turn the conversation had taken. "This is getting inappropriate," she said. Talia looked at her. "No, Claire. What was inappropriate happened 3 hours ago. This is just the part where people finally have to sit with it." Claire's jaw tightened. "You are making this into something it is not." "Then tell me what it is," Talia said. "Tell me why my meal was reassigned without my consent. Tell me why I was given a cold wrap while Mr. Larkin received a second hot entree. Tell me why you told me the meal was never loaded when the manifest says it was. Tell me why you called it a passenger priority decision." Claire looked like she wanted to say something sharp, something that could put Talia back in her place, but nothing came. The cabin was too quiet now. Even the people pretending not to listen were listening. Owen stood near the galley curtain, pale and rigid, and Talia could see him wrestling with something. Then, before Claire could answer, he stepped forward. "It was her meal," he said. Claire turned toward him so fast that her hair shifted loose at the side of her face. "Owen." He swallowed. "It was labeled 2D. I saw it." Claire reassigned it to 1A. Nobody moved. Grant looked at Owen, then at Claire. Claire's expression hardened. "You do not understand the full situation." Owen looked down, then back up. His voice was shaking, but it was steady enough. "I understand that Ms. Brooks asked about her meal, and you told her the system missed it. I understand that was not true." Claire stared at him with a look that said she would remember this moment for the rest of his career. Maybe she thought fear was still enough to control him, but there was something different in Owen now. The shame Talia had seen earlier had turned into a decision. Not a perfect one, not a brave one from the beginning, but a decision all the same. "You should have said something sooner," Claire said. Owen nodded. "I know." Then he added, "That is why I'm saying it now." The captain's voice came over the speakers, smooth and cheerful, announcing their descent into Vienna. He thanked everyone for flying Dominion Air and told them the local weather was clear, as if the cabin had not just turned into a courtroom at 30,000 feet. The plane tilted gently. Outside the window, the clouds broke apart, and the city below appeared in soft gray light, rooftops and roads and little dots of cars beginning their mornings. Talia watched Vienna come into view and thought about how strange it was that an entire city could be waking up while your own little world was cracking open in silence. Claire walked away without another word. She disappeared behind the curtain, and this time nobody followed her. Grant sat back in his seat, his hands folded in his lap. He looked older than he had an hour before. "I am sorry," he said. Talia nodded once. "I know." He looked at her, confused by that answer. "You keep saying that." Talia looked out the window. "Because I believe you did not know. But that is not the same thing as saying it does not matter." He did not respond. Maybe he did not have a response. Maybe that was the point. The plane landed a few minutes later. The wheels hit the runway hard enough to make a few passengers gasp. Then came the long rolling sound of rubber against pavement, the feeling of being pulled back into the real world. People started reaching for bags before the seatbelt sign went off. Someone behind Talia made a joke about missing their connection. Somebody else called home and said they had landed safely. Up front, Claire stayed out of sight. Owen stood near the galley with his hands clasped together, watching the cabin doors like he knew exactly what was waiting on the other side. When the plane finally came to a stop, the seatbelt sign chimed off. Everybody stood at once, because apparently no amount of luxury can keep people from acting like getting off an airplane is a competitive sport. Talia remained seated. She did not rush. She adjusted the cuff of her sleeve, put her phone into her bag, and waited until most of the cabin had cleared. Eleanor Price was still there too, holding her paperback under one arm. "You going to be all right?" Eleanor asked. Talia gave her a small smile. "I think I am about to find out." Eleanor nodded. "Then I will wait with you." Talia looked at her. "You do not have to." "You do not have to." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Honey, I watched a woman get treated like she did not belong in a seat she paid for. I have nowhere more important to be for the next 10 minutes. Talia laughed softly. "All right then." At the aircraft door, two people in dark suits waited beside the gate agent. One was a tall woman with short dark hair, a Dominion Air badge clipped to her blazer, and the kind of posture that suggested she had spent her whole career walking into rooms where people wanted to lie to her. The other was a man with a leather folder under his arm and no visible emotion at all. Behind them stood Marcus Vale, the director of customer ethics who had been texting Talia during the flight. He looked younger than she expected, maybe early 40s, tie slightly crooked, face drawn with the particular exhaustion of a man who had spent the night realizing his company had a problem bigger than one employee. When Talia stepped off the plane, Marcus moved toward her. "Ms. Mees. Brooks, I am Marcus Vale. First, I want to say I am sorry." Talia stopped walking. Marcus looked at her carefully, like he knew sorry was not enough but did not know what else to start with. "I am not interested in an airport apology," Talia said. Her voice was not angry. That almost made it worse. "I am interested in what happens when the cameras are off and nobody important is watching." Marcus nodded. "That is fair." The woman beside him stepped forward. "My name is Anika Roth. I am outside counsel for Dominion Air in Europe. We have preserved the service logs, crew communications, cabin footage, and catering records. We have initiated an independent review. Claire Hensley has been removed from active duty pending the investigation." Talia looked past them. Through the open aircraft door, she could see Claire standing near the rear galley with another member of the ground staff. Her arms were folded tightly over her chest. She was not crying. She was not apologizing. She was staring straight ahead, like someone still trying to decide whether she had done something wrong or simply gotten caught. Owen stood a few feet away from her, separated from the other crew members. He looked toward Talia, then down at the floor. Marcus followed her gaze. "Mr. Rallia, Bell has been asked to provide a statement as well," he said. "He will be treated as a witness, not as a target unless the investigation finds otherwise." Talia nodded. "Good." Marcus looked surprised. "You think he should not be disciplined?" Talia thought about Owen walking away earlier with that meal tray, afraid and ashamed. She thought about how easy it was for companies to blame the youngest person in the room, while the people with power wrote the rules that made silence feel safe. "He should be accountable for what he did not say," Talia said. But do not confuse that with being responsible for the culture that taught him not to say it. Marcus wrote something down. Maybe he understood. Maybe he was just trying to remember every word. Either way, Talia was not there to make his job easier. Claire was escorted down the jet bridge toward a private conference room at the end of the terminal. As she passed Talia, she stopped. The security staff did not stop her, but they watched closely. Claire looked different without the cabin lights. Her makeup was smudged, her hair was loosening. She looked less like a polished senior flight attendant and more like someone who'd been holding her breath for years and had finally run out of air. "You wanted this," Claire said. Talia met her eyes. "No." Claire gave a bitter laugh. "Come on, you wanted to ruin me. I wanted you to tell the truth." Claire shook her head. "You do not understand what this job is like. You do not understand the people we deal with. The demands, the complaints, the pressure to make certain passengers happy." Talia stood there quietly. Claire kept going, maybe because silence made her nervous. "Mr. Larkin is a major corporate client. He flies with us constantly. He spends more on one flight than some people spend in a year. When he asked for another entree, I made a decision." Talia nodded slowly. "Yes, you did. I did what I thought I had to do." "No," Talia said. "You did what you thought you could get away with." Claire's face tightened. "You think you are better than me because you have people making calls for you." Talia took one step closer, not threatening, not dramatic, just close enough that Claire had to look at her. "No, Claire. I think I have been in too many rooms where people made choices about me because they thought nobody would question them. I think you saw me sitting there alone and decided I was the easiest person to disappoint." Claire looked away. Talia continued quietly. "You are right about one thing. You do not know what my life is like. You do not know how many times I have had to be twice as prepared, twice as patient, twice as polite, just to receive half the respect you hand out to men who never even notice it. And maybe you were not thinking about race when you took my meal. Maybe you were thinking about money. Maybe you were thinking about tips. Maybe you were thinking about status. But that does not make it better. It makes it part of the same problem." Claire said nothing. For the first time, her eyes dropped. Talia could see the anger still there, but underneath, it was something else. Fear, maybe. Or the first thin crack of understanding. "You are going to cost me my job," Claire said. Talia shook her head. "No, your choices are going to cost you your job. There is a difference." Then she stepped aside and let the security team lead Claire away. Nobody clapped. Nobody cheered. Talia did not feel victorious. That was the thing people rarely understood about justice. It was not always satisfying in the way movies promised. Sometimes it just felt necessary. Sometimes it felt sad. Sometimes you looked at the person who hurt you and realized they were smaller than you expected. Smaller because they had spent years believing power meant deciding who deserved basic kindness. Marcus led Talia and Eleanor into a quiet meeting room near the gate. There were bottles of water on the table, a coffee machine in the corner, and a plate of untouched pastries that nobody seemed interested in. Anika Roth opened a laptop and turned it toward Talia. On the screen was the catering manifest, clear and simple. C2D. Talia Brooks, black cod with lemon rice, reassigned at 9:18 p.m. Seat 1A, Grant Larkin. Talia did not need to read it again, but she did. She read every line. She read the timestamp. She read Claire's employee code. She read the note that said service priority adjustment. That phrase kept sitting there on the screen like a lie dressed up for work. Marcus cleared his throat. "We have already found 2 other incidents involving Miss Hensley that were not escalated correctly. We are widening the review." Talia looked at him. "Widen it beyond her?" He nodded. "We intend to. Do not just review the complaints that came in. Review the complaints that never got filed because people assumed nobody would care. Look at service times, meal reassignments, call button response data. Who gets addressed by name? Who gets ignored? Look at the whole pattern." Marcus stared at her for a moment. "That will take time." Talia gave a tired smile. The pattern took time to build too. Eleanor, who had been quiet until then, leaned forward in her chair. "May I say something?" Marcus nodded quickly. Eleanor folded her hands on the table. "I am 68 years old. I am white. I have been treated well in places where other people were treated badly, and I am ashamed to say I did not always notice. Tonight I noticed because I was sitting close enough to see it. But I keep thinking about how many times I was not sitting close enough. Or maybe I was, and I just did not want to make myself uncomfortable." The room went still. Eleanor looked at Talia, then at Marcus. "You all have a choice here. You can call this an unfortunate incident and give everybody a memo. Or, you can admit this woman did not invent anything. She just had the evidence. Marcus nodded slowly. You're right. Eleanor gave him a look that said she had heard that phrase before. I know. A few minutes later, Grant Larkin appeared in the doorway. He had his coat on now and a carry-on bag in one hand. He looked like he had been standing outside for a while, deciding whether to come in. May I? He asked. Talia looked at Marcus, then nodded. Grant stepped inside. He did not sit. I have been thinking about what you said, he told Talia. About not asking what it costs somebody else when the world gives you what you want. Talia said nothing. He looked embarrassed again, but this time it seemed less like discomfort and more like responsibility trying to find its legs. I cannot undo what happened, he said, but I can provide a statement. I can confirm Claire told me there was an extra meal. I can confirm I did not ask where it came from. And I can make sure Dominion understands that being a high-value customer does not mean I want someone else treated like they are low value. Marcus looked up sharply. That would be helpful. Grant gave a dry laugh. It should not need to be helpful. Grant gave a dry laugh. It should not need to be helpful. It should be obvious. Talia looked at him. Then make it obvious in the rooms where people listen to you. He nodded. I will. Maybe he meant it. Maybe he would forget by next month. Talia had learned not to build her peace around promises made by men who suddenly discovered a problem once it landed in their lap. But she could tell he was trying. And sometimes trying was where accountability had to begin. By the time Talia reached her hotel near the Danube, the sun was up. Vienna looked clean and calm in the morning. All old buildings, quiet streets, bicycles parked against stone walls. The driver took her luggage inside, but she did not go straight to her room. She sat in the lobby by a tall window with a cup of coffee she did not drink. Her phone had 32 missed messages. Investors, board members, journalists who had somehow already heard there was an incident, a friend from college asking if she was okay. Marin had sent 3 updates. The first said Dominion had placed Claire on administrative suspension. The second said Owen had given a full statement. The third said the airline CEO had requested a private call with Talia before her meeting that afternoon. Talia stared at the messages for a while. Then she called Marin. Hey, Marin said softly. Hey, how are you holding up? Talia looked down at the street. A man in a red scarf was walking a small dog. A couple stood outside a bakery arguing over which pastry to buy. Life was happening everywhere. Ordinary and stubborn and completely uninterested in the fact that someone else's night had changed. I am tired, Talia said. Marin was quiet. You want me to cancel Vienna? Talia thought about the meeting upstairs later that day. The investors who had no idea she had spent the night fighting to be treated like a human being on an airplane. The deal she had worked 3 years to build. The future she had earned one brutal meeting, one sleepless night, one impossible decision at a time. No, she said. I did not come all this way to let somebody else's prejudice rewrite my schedule. Marin laughed softly. That sounds like you. Talia smiled. It better. The call with Dominion CEO came 2 hours later. His name was Malcolm Reeve, and he had the polished, careful voice of a man who had spent his life in boardrooms where every word had been reviewed by legal before it left his mouth. He apologized. He said the company was horrified. He said they would conduct a thorough investigation. Talia listened without interrupting. Then he asked what she wanted. It was a question people often asked when they were hoping the answer would be simple. Compensation, a refund, a statement, a free flight, something they could calculate and file away. Talia looked at the skyline outside her hotel window and said, I want you to stop treating this like a customer recovery issue. Malcolm was quiet. She continued, I do not want a voucher. I do not want a public apology drafted by 6 lawyers. I want you to examine why your staff believed it was acceptable to take something from one passenger and give it to another because one man looked more valuable. I want independent review, transparent findings, mandatory training, and a clear process for employees who see something wrong but are afraid to report it. And I want you to stop calling people priority passengers when what you mean is people you are scared to disappoint. There was a long pause. Then Malcolm said, would you consider advising us on that process? Talia almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because companies loved inviting the person they hurt to help fix them after the damage was done. I will consider it, she said, but understand this. I am not here to make your company look better. I am here to make sure the next person does not have to have my resources to be believed. Malcolm said he understood. Talia was not sure he did, but she knew he had heard her. That was a start. 3 months later, Dominion Air released the results of its review. They found patterns in premium cabin service that had been ignored for years, delayed responses for certain passengers, reassigned meals, uneven use of names and titles, complaints marked as isolated incidents even when the data said otherwise. Claire Hensley was dismissed after the investigation confirmed repeated misconduct and false reporting. Owen Bell received a formal warning, but he also became part of a new reporting process that allowed crew members to document concerns without going through the same managers who might want them buried. Grant Larkin gave a statement to the internal board and publicly withdrew from Dominion's elite corporate travel program until the company completed its reforms. Some people called him brave. Talia thought brave would have been asking questions sooner, but she kept that thought to herself. Dominion launched a new service accountability program. They changed their complaint system. They trained crews. They created a review panel that included former passengers, labor advocates, and employees from different backgrounds. They asked Talia to serve as an outside advisor. She accepted, but only after making them agree that her role would have actual authority and not just a nice photo in a press release. On her first day in that role, she walked into a training room full of flight attendants. Some looked curious. Some looked defensive. Some looked like they had already decided she was going to lecture them. Talia stood at the front of the room with no slides, no corporate slogan, no dramatic music. She set a cold turkey wrap on the table in front of her. The room went quiet. "This is not about a sandwich," she said. "It never was." Then she told them about Seat 2D, about the meal tag, about Owen looking away, about Eleanor deciding to speak, about Grant realizing he had benefited from something he never questioned, about Claire and how dangerous it could be when people confused preference with value. She looked around the room and said, "Every person who gets on your plane is carrying something you cannot see. Maybe they are going to bury a parent. Maybe they are taking the first vacation they have had in 10 years. Maybe they are closing the biggest deal of their life. Maybe they are just tired and hungry. Your job is not to decide who matters before you serve them. Your job is to remember that they all do." Nobody applauded at first. Then somebody in the back did. One person, then another. Talia did not care about the applause, not really. What mattered was the look on Owen's face. He was standing near the door, now working with the training team, listening like he wanted to make sure he never forgot the night he almost stayed quiet. A year after Flight 482, Talia boarded another plane. Not Dominion. She had business in Chicago, and she chose a different airline because she was still human, and sometimes healing looked like not giving the same people another chance too soon. She boarded early, found her seat near the window, and placed her bag overhead. A flight attendant approached her with a warm smile. "Ms. Brooks, welcome aboard. Your meal request is confirmed. We have the mushroom soup and the black cod ready whenever you are." Talia looked at her for a second. Then she smiled. "Thank you." That was all. No orchestra, no victory speech, no headline on a screen. Just a person doing their job right and another person being treated like she belonged. Later, when the plane lifted into the sky, Talia looked down at the city disappearing beneath the clouds and thought about Claire. She did not hate her. Hate would have been easier, maybe. Claire had made choices, and those choices had consequences. But Talia also knew Claire had not built the whole system alone. She had just learned how to survive inside it, how to profit from it, how to call it good service because nobody had ever forced her to call it what it was. And maybe that was the part people argued about the most. Some said Talia should have accepted the replacement meal and handled it privately. Some said Claire deserved compassion because everyone makes mistakes. Some said Grant Larkin should have been blamed more. Some said Owen should have spoken sooner. Some said the airline only changed because it got scared. Talia had heard all of it. Her answer was always the same. A mistake is forgetting somebody's coffee. A pattern is deciding whose coffee matters. And sometimes the only way to change a pattern is to make it impossible to pretend it is not there. So what do you think? Was Talia right to turn one denied meal into a full investigation, or did she go too far? Was Claire a villain, or was she just the most visible part of a bigger problem? And what would you have done if you were sitting in seat 2D, watching everyone around you get treated like they belonged, while you were handed a cold wrap and a shrug? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is not just a story about an airplane. It is about what happens when people stop accepting the quiet ways they are pushed aside. Share this story with someone who has ever been made to feel invisible, and subscribe for more stories where the truth does not always shout, but it still finds a way to be heard.